Now is the time to shop and save on Amana appliances at Lowe's. Get deals on select appliances, plus free delivery on items $396 and up. And you can bring home the Amana Appliance Suite, featuring a refrigerator with adjustable shelving and reversible doors to fit any space for under $2,000. Head to your local Lowe's store or visit us online at Lowes.com to save big on Amana appliances today. Only at Lowe's. Exclusions apply. See Lowes.com for details. Valid for $319.
Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 525 for March 13th, 2023. And I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Brendan, it's you and I. Again, nothing's changed.
And the winner is the old format.
The old format. 2 weeks in a row. It's like nothing changed on the podcast.
Oh.
It's just Brendan and I once again.
I
But-
like nostalgia.
Yeah, I like nostalgia as well. It does make sense, though, because Ryan is out and about and very busy these days. He's
For sure.
indulging in South by Southwest, watching John Wick 4 with John Wick
Yeah.
himself. He's apparently there in the theater. So he's having a grand old time, Mr. Ryan McQuaid.
He's 3 hours of Wick.
Yeah.
Apparently it's a long Wick.
Yeah, look, we all need some good Wick in our lives. And
Good Wick
that's
with some good dogs.
exactly. And as for Jay, well, if you've listened to this show at all, Jay and the Oscars, a little bit of oil and water, we'll say.
Complicated relationship.
Complicated,
I guess we can say.
yeah, exactly. He did not watch the Oscars last night. We tried to still get him to be here. We wanted Jay
Yeah.
to still be a part of all of this, but
Yeah.
he vetoed and said, nope, I don't want to be there.
He said he didn't want to sound too negative, which, to be fair, we tried to push him to get him on this show because we wanted to get the perspective of someone that simply maybe watched a couple clips on YouTube. Maybe they just simply saw the list of winners and could, just comment on, I guess, the superficiality of what happened last night as
Yes.
we're recording this with the Oscars. And I thought that would have been kind of neat, but
I agree.
yeah, we'll have our perspectives on this one only. And we did
Yeah.
watch the ceremony. So we'll talk about the ceremony as well as how we feel about the way it all shook up this time around.
Yeah, absolutely. We are here to recap the 2023 Oscars. The award season felt like it was 3 years long. But
I'm glad it's
finally
over. I'm so glad it's over. This is a post-celebratory episode of sorts. I'm glad that we're both rocking some polos or collared shirts here. We're kind of dressing up a little bit. It's a post-Oscars kind of thing. I didn't have a tuxedo, sadly, so this is the best that I can do. But in a way, it's like we're celebrating the official turn of a new leaf for the now 2023 award season, or like not award season, but just the movie season in general, which I'm looking forward to. I'm looking for some freshness now. I don't know about you.
I agree. I'm always looking for freshness, but I do enjoy celebrating the Oscars despite all of its controversies and frustrations. I don't know if I'm too far removed. I'm not quite as cynical as Jay, but
we've had some pretty bad thoughts about the award ceremonies over the past few years. We'll say that.
Look, I'm generally not a fan of turning art into sports. I feel like it's disingenuous to what art is supposed to be. That said, I do like celebrating movies. It's a passion of ours. Obviously, we love it. We're devoted to it. So celebrating good movies, despite how we get there, we do like doing that. Some years it's more of a challenge than others. It wasn't quite as challenging this year. I thought all of the nominations were fairly good. I really liked a lot of the nominees.
It was a
this
strong
year.
We talked about this. The 10 movies nominated for Best Picture. I mean, 8 of them, I think I would grade at least a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. That's kind of unheard of. I can't remember the last time with that many nominees where I think most of them are at least very good to great, which is pretty awesome.
Absolutely. And I thought about this when I was doing our Oscars prediction show with Brian Rowe. 4 of the 5 nominees for Best Original Screenplay are also my nominees for that category at the InSession Film Awards. The only one that was missing was After Sun, which should have been there in lieu of...
I mean, it should have been in a lot of places. It should have been. Paul Mescal should have been mentioned in Jimmy Kimmel's opening monologue regarding first-time acting nominees.
I agree. But, that is to say, I still liked the nominations on the whole. Obviously, it wasn't perfect, but there was certainly a lot to appreciate. So despite how conflicted I am with turning art into sports, it is something I do come to celebrate each year. I don't know if I've talked about this on the show before. I think I have. But the Oscars is a night where I invite a bunch of people to my house.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few nights of the year where I get completely blasted. I don't drink alcohol all that much. It's not part of my daily life usually, but this is the one night where I get to indulge, partially because these award ceremonies are so awkward that the only way I can get through and really push by those barriers is to just, have a few gin and tonics.
Yeah, I was going to say that looked like a gin and tonic that you were drinking based on what I think it was on Twitter that you posted an image of that.
Yeah, was doing a lot of gin and tonic or gin and soda last night. That's mostly what I was indulging in.
Is that usually the case? I thought you were more of a bourbon guy after living in Kentucky.
No.
Both of us living in Kentucky for a while.
Yeah, so I am a big bourbon guy as well. And typically I have gone for bourbon. However, on vacation last year, we were at a bar. I was at a bar with my wife.
Yeah.
And I was looking through the menu and they had a drink on there with gin. And I had never really tried gin. It was completely blind for me. I never really had it before, but I was like, this sounds interesting. I'm on vacation. Let's try something new.
Sure.
So I got one, absolutely loved it. Probably drank 50 of them, and so then it became my thing. So, I mean, I still will. Absolutely. I will down a bourbon every now and then. Again, I don't drink often,
bourbon.
but
but
I love a good bourbon, but gin has really become my crux over the last year or so.
Oh, that's so interesting. My fiance loves vodka tonics. That's probably her favorite drink, which is a little comparison there, I guess.
Sure.
But, I guess this speaks to age because I remember when we were both living in Lexington, Kentucky, JD, and we went out together quite a bit. We didn't just see movies or do podcasts together. We went to a couple of bars in downtown Lex. Yeah, the pavilion there and everything. We mostly drank beer. That's how you know you're getting old, when you drink less beer.
Drinking less beer. Look, my body just can't really handle that much alcohol, especially that much beer.
Well, yeah.
So,
I think it's the gluten. I think it's the gluten, man.
Exactly. So I usually save that for my beer league for hockey, because after the games, the guys want to drink, and I don't partake too much, but I save it for that mostly.
Yeah.
So when I'm at home, I'm usually drinking bourbon and now gin over the last
year. There you go.
That's it.
Yeah.
But again, I don't really drink too much. Other than the Oscars is by far the most I'll drink in a single evening throughout the entire year. And again, part of it is to get through the ceremony. It's also really long. And also I'm just having fun. I mean,
it's your thing. It's your thing.
It's our thing. It's the Oscars. It's the Super Bowl for a lot of us. Again, despite how we feel about awards and all of that, it's just a fun night to get together with your friends and celebrate film. And I enjoy doing that. So I had a great time. And I did get dressed up. Because you mentioned a moment ago that we're, kind of semi dressed up more than normal. I don't have any of my hockey
Friday
jerseys
business
on.
casual, I feel like right now. I'm still in my jeans at least. So at least that's partially there.
But I did dress up last night for the Oscars for our little fancy home party anyway. It was a lot of fun.
Well done, sir. You did better than me. I was still in sweatpants.
At any rate, let's go ahead and transition into this. I guess before we get into the winners and the categories and all that, what did you think about the ceremony on the whole? Jimmy Kimmel, structure, flow? How did it all feel for you?
This is such a loaded question, I feel like, because I almost think I can argue both sides of whether it was a good ceremony or not. And the reason why is really just in the trajectory of how we felt about the ceremonies over the past few years. And we've been no stranger to saying this, JD, but maybe the past two ceremonies at least have been kind of chaos. Like there were choices that were made, some securities that were not made, I'll simply say, given last year. There was a lot of swings being made. So that was happening. And then the whole debacle, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Sense of time has gone out the window for me lately. But the whole switching of the order with Best Picture and putting Best Actor. That was 2 years ago? Okay, yeah.
See, it's funny because I thought that's what you were alluding to. There was the literal swing last year, and then 2 years ago, the metaphorical swing by Soderbergh to go big at the end. So.
Yeah, to go big or go home, and we all went home. But you think about those two examples. Of course, you trace it back to the 2017 ceremony, I think, when the whole Moonlight La La Land swap accidentally occurred. So I feel like many people still aren't over that, which is why last night's ceremony was probably a breath of fresh air, given how controlled it felt. It was a very familiar feeling ceremony. And I mean that in sort of a positive way. I almost equate it to how we felt maybe seeing The Force Awakens for the first time, because it was sort of like our re-entry into what we already know and love about Star Wars, which is what I feel like last night was trying to do for the Oscars. It was a very familiar type of show. You know, we've seen Jimmy Kimmel host I don't even know how many times, but even in the past,
his third time?
Third time in like a short amount of time.
Yeah,
so
last 6 years or so.
And honestly, I thought he was fine, but I think you kind of needed fine after everything that the Oscars went through over the past few years. I mean, some of his opening monologue, I couldn't help but think, you know, we're on film Twitter, the whole Nicole Kidman being trapped in an abandoned AMC. Like, that's like old jokes for us on film Twitter. We've been making that joke for the past year. If you're on film Twitter, you've seen that before. Although it's funny for those who aren't in that world. The general audiences can pick up on something. So it's funny in that regard. I admittedly did get a chuckle when he mentioned about James Cameron and Tom Cruise being the ones that brought us back to the theater, and they're the ones who didn't make it to the theater. So I love the comedic irony there. So I guess, you know, I feel like I could be harder on this ceremony if it weren't for the cluster F of the past couple ceremonies. I would be calling it too safe. I would be calling it too sterile, like it didn't take any chances. But I think we needed something a little safe and controlled after the chaos that we got. So in that regard, I'm glad we've found our footing again as far as the way that the show is paced and structured. Still a couple things we'll talk about that I didn't like, but overall, I think it's a step in the right direction, given what came directly before it.
Yeah. So just to get right into it, I absolutely loved the structure and flow of last night. I loved it. I think it's one of the very best Oscar ceremonies we've had in a really long time, partially because we're coming off the heels of the cluster bombs that you mentioned earlier that we saw last year and the year previously. But even going back the last 6, 7, 8 years, their ceremonies have been often very disjointed. They've been a cluster in their own right in terms of all of these comedic gags and these sideshows that these comedians feel like they have to do. What I loved about last night is that it trimmed off a ton of fat. It was a very seamless show for the most part. It was way less tacky than usual. Really, the TV timeouts were the biggest culprit, and the self-indulgent marketing by Disney, the Little Mermaid trailer.
We'll get
that out of here.
Get the Warner Brothers thing as well. Get that out of there. Especially given that there were at least 3 instances where speeches got rudely interrupted by music, only to make room for exactly these things that we're talking about, and that was really unfortunate.
I completely agree, because once we get through the opening monologue, which I do want to speak to here in a moment, what it was mostly was the categories. It was about the nominees themselves, or it was about celebrating cinema, whether it be these montages or various clips from these films. it all came back to celebrating cinema in some way. The only sideshow distraction we had throughout the entire night was when Kimmel went into the crowd to do a short Q&A because they had to redo the stage. That was the only reason.
Yeah.
And he was transparent about that, which I also appreciate, because oftentimes they do these side gags that are absolutely erroneous and unnecessary, and they trimmed all of that, partially because they wanted to include every single one of these categories to be on air this year after the controversy of doing some of them off air.
Right.
So to do that, they trimmed out like all the sideshow distraction nonsense they got rid of, and they only had to do one, and it was, admittedly pretty brief. And the only reason we had the one is because they had to reset the stage. Understandable. But aside from that, it was a very seamless show. It had a really nice flow to it. The TV timeouts were the only thing
long.
really getting in the way, because you would do a category, a clip, maybe a little thing here and there, and then 16 minutes of commercials.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
God.
I get that's how they have to make their money, but at the same time, this is ABC we're talking about, who's owned by Disney. Do they really need it? So there's a double-edged sword there. But no, you're right. Really, the biggest culprit came down to ad space, and then two instances, as we already alluded to, with Disney trying to take the time to market a new trailer for The Little Mermaid, which honestly just came off as awkward and unnecessary.
Yeah, that was bad.
And honestly, the trailer is not that great if you ask me, but that's kind of beside the point. Really, the problem is
that just made
the self-congratulatory thing, which was very annoying.
And that was clearly out of Kimmel's hands. In terms of getting us from one element to the next, I thought Kimmel did a really great job. And that's just in terms of structure and flow. The other thing I loved is that as he would introduce people to the stage or new categories, he would have these small little gags that were, again, brief. It wasn't like a 10-minute sideshow distraction. Yeah. It was like a 15-second joke, and then we're moving on to the next thing. And oftentimes, I mean, the jokes themselves I thought were fine to pretty good. Yeah. And in the middle of it, he was, for one, he wasn't antagonistic toward any of the movies and nominees. And that's another thing, right? Because you substitute him with something like a Ricky Gervais, and that's all Gervais does. He loves stirring up the pot and getting the hornet's nest all riled up, which can be great. I don't mind that style or tone. Gervais at the Globes is a really great fit, I think. And he was always very good. But the one thing I do like about the Oscars, and at least with Kimmel last night, is his material wasn't antagonistic. He wasn't trying to point the finger, although he did that a little bit playfully, but it was mostly about honoring and showing reverence and celebration toward these movies. Perhaps part of that is how some of them had saved the theater experience, saved theatrical distribution. Maybe that's where that love is coming from, but he showed an interesting reverence, and not just to the actors, not just to the Best Picture nominees, but the craft categories, which I thought was extremely important, because it's not often that you see that. And as someone, like, I come from a sound engineering background, so I know what it's like to be in that position, to do a lot of that hard work, and it's all behind the scenes. Like, you never get recognized for it. Yeah, and the Oscars is one of those nights where we do get to recognize these, but oftentimes, even at the Oscars, they kind of brush through them as quickly as they can, because we want to get to Best Actress and we want to get to Best Director and all that sort of stuff. And so the below the line categories have often kind of been, shoved to the wayside a little bit until last night. I thought Kimmel did a very good job of recognizing those categories. So the flow and structure was good. Yeah. And also just in terms of the content, it came from a pure place, and I really appreciated that.
Well, it wasn't just Kimmel as well. I'm thinking of an example of when Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors came out.
Exactly.
Was that for Best Cinematography?
Yes.
I think. Yeah. There was a lot of time dedicated to camera tech, and they even reference not just Spike Lee but also Orson Welles and the way that they would, cut a literal hole in the floor to angle a certain shot, like little things like that. I really do appreciate, which is probably why the ceremony felt less, I guess, sporty this time around, if there's any word for it.
It felt more celebratory, and that hasn't always been the case.
Yeah, and while I will admit I sometimes like when there's a host that's a bit, I don't want to say jabby, but maybe a little bit bold in the way that they comedically point the finger at things. Because I kind of like when the ceremony does take a few risks and the host is given the opportunity to take some risks.
Yeah.
At the same time, it raises the question, was last night the right time for that, given the 2 years that led up to it?
Yes.
And the two ceremonies specifically that led up to it. And maybe not. So as a result, the show not only came off as less sporty, but weirdly less political as well, despite the fact that it really celebrated diversity with the film Everything Everywhere All at Once doing so well and honoring said diversity, Asian diversity specifically. So it had that. It had a very indirect social message without people or presenters or even the host directly commenting on that in an almost antagonistic way, like you said. Sometimes that's warranted, but there was, like I said, a weird sense of safety with last night that I could easily criticize, given some similar award shows or award ceremonies that came maybe 10 years ago or so. But yeah, I think we needed something like that to ease us back into the love of movies.
I completely agree. And that's why I had a great time last night. I've seen a lot of comments about how the ceremony was bland and dull. And maybe that's the case because, you know what? There was a lot less comedy than usual. And I think that's a great thing. I don't like all of the sideshow nonsense. Get it out of here. Like we don't need it.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Now, to be fair, in some cases, with every Oscar ceremony, the comedy can be hit or miss, right? And
that's the other thing.
That's it. There were occasions where last night the comedy didn't always work for me. I really struggle with Elizabeth Banks coming out with the literal cocaine bear next to her. That just did not work for me personally. I was really waiting for that to be Matt Damon. I've
read that theory, and I was hoping that would be the case as well.
I thought it could have been a missed opportunity right there, but I mean, it's always hit or miss, but where it does hit, I think it really did work. I mean, I know there's a lot of, I guess, controversy right now regarding Hugh Grant and the interview that he gave leading up to the awards, but him with Andy McDowell was really quite a riot. Some of the stuff that he had to say, I thought was really funny. I
agree.
So there were bits that did work for me.
And all of that was on stage and it was brief. We weren't doing these elaborate pranks. We weren't leaving the theater and going somewhere else. We weren't pausing and waiting for pizza to come and let's take a giant selfie for 1 million likes. Like it was none of that. A lot of after the opening monologue, which I thought was pretty good. Again, more reverent than maybe I anticipated. Of course, you were going to get a Will Smith jab in there. But
again, it was brief. It was more of a direct not a commentary, but it was more addressing the Academy realizing they need to make some changes. Yeah, that's what it is. So it actually had like a sense of productivity in bringing it up.
And he had to bring it up. He couldn't not say something. But I like how he kind of built to it. It wasn't the first thing, which he could have let off with it, and I think everyone would have been, okay with that. But I do like how he builds up to it. It was a great monologue. It ends really great with the not to gag, which I thought was great. And then again, everything was pretty seamless, getting us from one transition to the next, in a way that doesn't involve a ton of levity. Less so than a lot of other years, but I'm okay with that because I don't watch the Oscars for stand-up comedy.
Right.
That's not what we're there for. We're there to get it, and it's already a long show.
Yeah.
So let's just I've always been a proponent of do the opening monologue, and then after that, the host, you can just get rid of them. Just get us from one thing to the next. You know what I mean? I don't
just
need
there
all
for
of this
transition purposes, really. Yeah.
I don't need a ton of filler. And the little filler that Kimmel brought, again, they were 15-second jokes or 15-second gags that just got us to the next thing. So I thought the ceremony was seamless, and then it could just be about the nominees and winners. And there was a lot to appreciate last night. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once won more above the line Oscars than any movie in the 95-year history of the Oscars.
Seven Oscars in particular. I think it won with 3 of them being from acting categories, and then also winning screenplay, director, and best picture. I don't know the history well enough, but isn't that the first time a movie has done that since like the 1930s?
As far as that many above the line categories, they're the first to do it. They're only third film ever to have 3 acting Oscars, Streetcar Named Desire and Network being the other 2, and neither of those films won Best Picture. So everything has a leg up on those, historically speaking. Anyway.
Who would have thought this weird, quirky, Matrix-style movie would be the one to do that?
Unbelievable. It blows my mind. Yeah. It blows my mind. Like when I first saw that movie, when we first discussed it on the show, I'm sure we talked about it. Like no one was anticipating that this film was going to go on to win Best Picture or win 7 Oscars. Like it's so weird and bizarre and eccentric. And, you know, it's everything we love about the Daniels. For the Academy to embrace it the way they have is truly indicative of this shift that we've been talking about since 2016 and Moonlight winning.
Even more so than I think most people anticipated, because it's been pretty rare to see a movie that goes on to win Best Picture nowadays that also wins director and screenplay. I feel like there's been this, I don't know if it's been an attempt or like an agenda or anything, but I feel like there's been this staggering of sorts that Best Picture would then be either matched with best director or a screenplay win. So then that way they can show love to a more technical movie, but Everything Everywhere All at Once was literally everything and everywhere as far as what it was encompassing.
All at once.
So I guess the Academy had no choice, but most of what it won, I mean, to be fair, and this is not a bad thing, there were really not many surprises last night as far as what won. Really, the only one might be Jamie Lee Curtis for Best Supporting Actress. At least that one took me by surprise. I think a lot, but then again, that whole category was kind of the biggest 5-headed coin flip in many ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think a lot of people expected it to be a big winner in many of those categories, but it even went above and beyond what I think most predictions were suggesting.
I completely agree. I was a little taken aback by Jamie Lee Curtis, but I don't know if I was wholly surprised. And maybe this comes down to the conversations I had with Brian Rowe doing the Chasing the Gold the last month or so, you know, because Jamie Lee Curtis had built up a lot of steam. She won Indie Spirits. I know Ryan McQuaid, I think, mentioned that Indie Spirits isn't all that indicative of much, but perhaps it's indicative of some momentum that had come her way, because I don't think she won anything of significance leading up to the Oscars. And then she wins, but also Jamie Lee Curtis, was there a bigger champion of this movie on the whole than her? She campaigned everywhere and campaigned extremely hard. And honestly, I think that was the kicker when it came to that category. There is the narrative of it, right? There's Jamie Lee Curtis. She's been around for decades, has never been nominated before. And that was a theme throughout the night for sure. So that's a part of it. And also she campaigned her butt off and got in front of voters, got in front of a lot of people. And I think ultimately that was that was the kicker.
I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you want to put any, phrase to it, because we sometimes know the Academy likes to honor the loudest person in the room as far as the marketing is concerned, which is not always a bad thing. I mean, sometimes a movie needs to do that just to garner any type of representation, and sometimes it deserves to be the movie that garners that representation. But yeah, because Jamie Lee Curtis was so vocal about being a proponent for the film, it almost falls into like the Andrea Riseborough kind of conversation of sorts. In a different way for sure, maybe with a different agenda given who is involved in those conversations. I don't want to talk about that, but yeah, like because she was so vocal, she became kind of this face for the movie that was going to get honored so much that it calls attention to voters, I guess. And maybe that's what it was.
No, I completely agree. I think that's very much what it was in a lot of ways. I do wonder how it'll age, though. My gut instinct is that it won't age all that well, her win there. I think it'll be lumped in with the Scorsese, Departed, the Leo, Revenant. It'll
be seen as a legacy win for Jamie Lee Curtis as opposed to Jamie Lee Curtis's performance in that movie. And she was probably my least favorite of the 5 nominees. I really like her in the film. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to suggest
it's not a knock on her.
Yeah, but I've seen other performances from her that I much prefer. I liked her in Freaky Friday, if I'm being honest. I think her performance there is even better in its own way. But yeah, it does feel like a legacy win, which the Academy's done before. You know, they're no stranger to that.
And again, as we've been talking about, legacy, big part of it. It was a through line throughout the night, but it was as much a marketing win, a sports win, if you will. I mean, that's kind of what it was.
I will say, if it's a legacy win for anything, it's the 1992 film Encino Man, and I love the reference to that. I like that movie. I'm just gonna come out and say I like that movie, and I'm glad they referenced that last night between Brendan Fraser and Ke Huy Quan. I thought that was really clever.
Well, and that's the thing. Like Jamie Lee Curtis, I don't love the win. Stephanie Sue's performance in that film, I think, is going to age beautifully. Like a fine.
It's a more timely performance, I think. Too.
She should have won. If they were going to honor everything in that category, it should have gone to her. My personal vote would have gone to Carrie Condon, but you know, that's 1A and 1B as far as I'm concerned. You can flip a coin between those two, or Angela Bassett. I still love that performance as well. I would have been happy with either of those. But when it comes to supporting actor, Ke Huy Quan winning, I mean, how can you not love the guy? Like, his joy is so palpable and so incessant. It never dissipated. It's South by last year to now. Like, that's the thing. Always been there.
Would he have been my vote of the 5 nominees? Probably not. I think I would have given it to, in fact, I know I would have given it to Barry Keoghan. He was my favorite of the 5, but I almost would have been tempted to vote for Ke Huy Quan because I would have rather seen his speech. and it was worth it. It was great. I even tweeted this: if you weren't tearing up during his speech, then I don't like you. It's as simple as that. Like it wasn't even just what he said, just looking at him. He didn't even have to say a word. Your heart was breaking for the guy. You felt such joy to see what he was going through.
And unlike Jamie Lee Curtis, there really is no debate whether he deserves that or not. Even if he's not your top choice, and for me he was, I would have easily, like, that category is not even close as far as I'm concerned.
Gotcha. Okay.
But even if it's not, there's not a lot of people out there going, I don't know if that's a deserved performance. Nobody's saying that.
No, I think you're right. I'm not going to say he was the glue that held that movie together, but I mean, between him, Michelle Yeoh, and Stephanie Sue, I mean, if any trio from that movie should have won awards, it should have been the 3 of them.
I agree. I mean, say what you will about Michelle Yeoh, Sue, and they are really great. We'll get to Michelle Yeoh here in a little bit, but I think Ke Huy Quan is just as important. If his performance is lesser than what it is, I don't think the film is quite what it was in the end. Yeah. You know, especially when you think about the Wayman sequence that takes place near the 3rd act. I mean, that's one of the best sequences of the entire year, and he's a big reason that works.
Absolutely.
So, it's a great performance. Do love that. And then, of course, Michelle Yeoh, the second woman of color to win an Oscar in 95 years, which is not great. Not great. And she's the first Asian actress to win for leading actress, which is also incredible. So I love the historical nature of it as well. And I will also argue, I know that the internet likes to pit them up as a rivalry, even though it's not a rivalry, and we should stop that. Yeah. Because Cate Blanchett is also phenomenal. And Tar, if she would have won, I would have been equally as excited. But Michelle Yeoh deserved to win that award last night as well. It is not just a legacy thing. It's not the Jamie Lee Curtis thing. It's not.
It's sort of all the above in
diversity.
some ways. It's not one thing over the other. There are a lot of factors that incorporate all of those things that led to her win. The only difference is she is the reason that movie works so well, and it's such a towering performance.
And I want to emphasize that because we can talk about the historical nature of it. We can talk about, the greatness of what she brings to that win and that category, given those exterior factors. But I want it to be crystal clear that more than anything else, she earned that Oscar. Her performance is that good.
And
She's
that's where you have
that film.
that's where you have to separate in some cases the legacy win versus the earned win, and what happens when both of those are kind of coexisting in the same awards win, right? Because sometimes that does happen. And that kind of was the case with Michelle Yeoh, but the difference here, unlike, let's say, I don't know, Martin Scorsese winning Best Director for The Departed, okay? Like that was very much a win because he is Martin Scorsese. He could have directed anything that year, and they probably would have said, it's his time. It's his time. He could have directed a commercial, and they'd say, oh, short film, we'll give it a Best Director nom. It'll be our first time for everything. It'll be unique. But with Michelle Yeoh, the performance is so towering that it straddles both of those lines, and it makes it an earned win regardless of the legacy. So if you forget about the legacy in 10 or 15 years and you look at just the Oscar win for that specific performance, it's like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. And that's all that matters.
And that's 100%. Yeah. I mean, the narrative behind it is a cherry on top for sure. And it's nice that she's being recognized for all of the hard work that she's done over these last few decades, because we've all come to love Michelle Yeoh for the work that she's done. Yeah. And the Daniels themselves have talked about this in interviews. They recognize that she hasn't been given the opportunities that she probably deserves because of her legacy and what she's done for film over these last few decades. So
it made me go back and think about it too, like just given her own legacy. That I remember we were all watching the James Bond films in preparation for No Time to Die coming out, and I gave the Pierce Brosnan films a revisit, and I ended up liking Tomorrow Never Dies the best, and it really was because of Michelle Yeoh. It had nothing to do with him or the movie he was in. In fact, it's not even that great of a movie, but I wanted to see more of that character, and that just proves how great she is as a performer and as a presence in general.
Yeah, she certainly has a presence. She's done a lot of great work. The narrative is there, but more than anything else, she deserves that award. She earned it with her performance. Singularly, that alone is more than enough. And I mean, let's be honest, that's what it should come down to. We know that's not what it all comes down to, but that should be the thing. And again, in another 30, 50 years, if we're looking back at this debate, I will listen to the argument about Cate Blanchett because she's also great and also earned the Oscar, but there's only one of them. And I don't like the argument that Kate should have won because she earned it. That's not enough for me because Michelle Yeoh also earned it. So
it's two things. Like, who do you think was the best performance of the five versus those who simply earn it because it was a great performance? Sometimes I don't really care. As long as the performance is a worthy awards win, I'm fine with that. It becomes different if I'm actually part of the voting process. If I'm part of the voting body, it's different. And to be honest, Cate Blanchett was probably my favorite of the five, but that doesn't mean I'm butthurt that she didn't win. I don't play that game. That's a boring game, if you ask me. That just gives you something to complain about. And I don't think that's any fun. I'm just happy that not just that Michelle Yeoh won, but I thought her speech was great. I love what she had to say.
Wonderful. It's also worth noting that Michelle Yeoh and Ke Huy Quan, both of them winning, it is the first time that two Asian actors have won Oscars in the same night. So that's another notch on the belt for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and in addition to all of its other records that it shattered last night. And speaking of Ke Huy Quan, we also have to note the hug, the moment with Harrison Ford, and the nostalgia of that. Oh my God. It's just incredible.
This is such a lucky accident in some ways because we clearly have Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny coming out later this year. That's been in development for a while.
Long time,
I mean, what if, and I say this with a big what if, Lucasfilm, whoever, Spielberg tied to it before James Mangold was, and whoever's involved in the writing. What if Short Round was never originally supposed to be part of that movie, they're probably thinking, crap, we got to plan some
They gotta
reshoots now.
reshoot. Yeah,
And
seriously.
I wouldn't be surprised if that
just
were
a
happening.
cameo. And if nothing else, a little cameo would be fun.
I mean, look at it this way. There's a new Disney Plus show coming out, right?
There is,
American
yeah.
Born Chinese that features pretty much the cast of Everything Everywhere
It's
All
the
at Once. So
exact same
Disney
cast.
is now trying to bank on the success of that movie.
It is so
as
lazy
if to say that
and
they're a
brazen.
part of it. I mean, come on.
Not even trying to hide it. Disney's
Yeah.
just like, we're going to take the exact same cast and put them in a new thing over here. It's like, what are you
gosh.
doing?
Yeah,
Okay.
way to play the field, Disney. Yeah, way to play the field.
Look, I'm all for these guys getting work though. So like, if they're happy, if they signed on and they love what they're doing, that's fine. But
Sure.
also, come on, Disney.
Come on, Disney.
Yeah, but that was a great little moment with Ke Huy Quan and Harrison Ford. I thought that was really great, really touching, as if he didn't already shatter our hearts earlier in the night with his speech. And I'm with you. That was an incredible moment, just him talking about, coming over on a boat and the American dream and everything along with that. And yeah, it was a very, very poignant speech. Really, all of the speeches I thought were very good in that regard.
Yeah.
So Everything Everywhere All at Once dominates. You know what else dominated, Brendan? This Little War film from Germany scooped up a ton of awards last night. What'd you think about that?
It's so funny because I just couldn't help but laugh at the narrative on film Twitter as that was happening, because everyone's saying like, oh gosh, this movie is sweeping. That means it's going to probably win Best Picture. Now it's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's like,
Just
this,
wait.
this happens
wait, yeah.
every year. You get one movie that's a technical juggernaut that starts winning a lot of these tech awards, and all of a sudden people start second guessing in the middle of the night that somehow this technical juggernaut is going to end up winning Best Picture. And sometimes that ends up being the case, but a lot of times it's just the order of awards. It's just the sequence of it. And it happened to be that All Quiet on the Western Front picked up a lot of these awards that were very closely tied to the structure last night. Maybe the biggest surprise being Best Original Score, because I know a lot of people were anticipating Babylon for that, and it kind of made sense, but I'm glad that film, All Quiet on the Western Front specifically, took home that award, because I still can't get that 3 synth note score out of my head.
Yeah, and that's where it was a little bit of a surprise, but why it's also great to have friends like Brian Rowe and Ryan McQuaid and Matt Neglio, because if you listen to them, they've been anticipating this for some time.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a surprise. Justin Hurwitz is mostly beloved. He's been nominated for everything, right, that he's done except First Man, which is an egregious
Which might be his
error,
best score, honestly.
which is his best work. I joked with Brian when we did our predictions that if he won for Babylon, they should give him 2 Oscars, one for Babylon and one for the
one as an
retrospective
apology
error.
for
as an apology, yeah. So but he doesn't win. It just seemed like all the momentum was in All Quiet's favor.
Right.
And especially when they won production design and cinematography. Of course, they won Best Internet. It was nominated for 9 Oscars.
Yeah.
Incredible. I still can't wrap my head around how you nominated it for that many and won. It won a ton of awards last night, but it directed itself, apparently.
Apparently, yeah. But we'll still give it to Ruben Östlund as a directing nom for Triangle of Sadness, but not Edward Berger. Makes perfect sense to me.
I can't fathom that kind of mentality. Like, I just don't get that whatsoever. The makeup award was interesting because I was anticipating, maybe Elvis. I had predicted Elvis. I thought Elvis was going to win more last night. If there was a surprise of the night, it was that Elvis went home empty-handed, because the Academy loves those kind of movies. Sure. They love biopics like that. Elvis had not just the performance at the core of it, but of course it had all that Baz Luhrmann flair. So I thought for sure it was going to win either costumes or makeup, maybe Butler for actor as well. I thought it would at least win something. When The Whale won for best makeup, that's when I started to wonder if maybe this is Fraser's night. I know that was a lot of the talk on social media. That certainly made a lot of sense, because if it didn't go to Elvis, the next thing for me, I was thinking All Quiet. I think there's a case to be made about the incredible makeup of that film, given the grisly and dirty, murky nature of that film, and how the actors have to embody that with all of the makeup that they wear, especially in the back half of that movie. And it's quite a lot at times.
Yeah, the use of mud from a makeup standpoint, the use of mud was almost character in that movie.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I thought, with all the love that All Quiet is getting, maybe it does win. I thought it had a genuine shot if it wasn't going to be Elvis. So The Whale was a little bit of a surprise. But given the, aesthetic and everything that went along with Fraser's character in that film, I can kind of see where they're coming from there.
I think Fraser's performance may have helped, I guess, elevate that award a little bit.
In hindsight, that seems to be the case.
Well, and I was predicting Brendan Fraser for the win that night, and only because I felt like it was in keeping to the not just the first timer. Yeah, well, the narrative. Yeah, like the legacy / first timer awards for acting. And I felt like, as much as I loved Austin Butler and Elvis, I felt like Brendan Fraser fit that narrative a bit more, so just in that regard, I felt like there was consistency there. So his win for makeup, I think, was, well, not his win, but the movie's win for makeup, I think, was more due to his performance kind of elevating that, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I think what's interesting about that, though, circling back to legacy, because last night, for the first time in 88 years, and this goes back to maybe the stat you were thinking of earlier, since 1934, all of the Best Actor nominees were first-timers. It was the first time in 80 years that it happened. So in terms
that's
of
probably
legacy,
what I'm thinking about, of them all being first-timers. Yeah.
So in terms of legacy and narrative, yes, there's Brendan Fraser, but what about Colin Farrell? He's been around a long time.
Paul Mescal
equally has earned this. No, not Paul Mescal. Eventually, we'll get there with him.
I mean, they're all first timers, but at the same time, the narrative being,
but the narrative, the legacy of it, Farrell has also been around for a long time, and arguably earned that even more than Fraser did, if we're just talking about performance on their own terms.
Well, he was probably my favorite performance of the bunch. Well, he and Paul Mescal are my two favorite performances of Best Actor specifically.
Yeah, same.
And I would say Colin Farrell, just in general, was the best actor of 2022.
The best overall year. Yeah.
The best resurgence there, but also I could see why Brendan Fraser maybe had a stronger narrative, and it was really due to his unfortunate circumstances and the adversity he had to overcome and what he dealt with and how he overcame it. So the narrative is certainly stronger in that regard, and maybe that solicited more votes. And not to say it should or shouldn't. I'm just stating it as like a predictive fact. But that's probably what ended up happening. But you're right. Colin Farrell, he had his own narrative behind him. And thankfully, he's still a young enough guy that I think we'll see more from him as far as awards, love, and consideration. If he just continues to work with Martin McDonagh, I'm sure we'll get another nod for him someday.
And maybe we will. I was extremely cynical about this when we did our Oscars prediction with Brian last week, because I talked quite a bit about the year he had. Like, I struggled to wrap my mind around the idea that he was kind of in a distant third in this race, that it was Austin Butler and it was Brendan Fraser kind of leading the way, and Colin Farrell's sort of kind of there, straggling there. And third, didn't even win the BAFTA, which blows my mind. And again, like, you think about his performance in Banshees on its own terms, there is so much to love about the nuance and the poignancy and everything that goes into his performance there. But if you want to consider his year in totality, After Yang is one of his best performances as well, maybe the best performance of his career. He's great in the Batman. He's the best thing about the Ron Howard movie.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, in terms of an actor's singular year, you just cannot do better than what Colin Farrell did. How on earth did he fall that far behind that it came down to Fraser and Austin Butler? And God love them. This isn't an anti-Butler or Fraser sentiment.
Right.
But I struggled to wrap my mind around how he could have that great of a year. And even, again, remove everything else. If it's just about Banshees, that alone should put him in the race.
Okay,
more.
I'll say this. I can understand being second behind Brendan Fraser, given the narrative that we just talked about. But still being behind Austin Butler kind of surprises me. And maybe it was just the Elvis love. And again, I like Austin Butler in that film. I actually like Elvis. I think it's a pretty good movie. But I mean, Austin Butler is a young dude. He'll have way more opportunities to score some great and innovative performances that'll probably get some awards love in some capacity. His performance in Elvis, I don't think holds a candle to what Colin Farrell is doing in either the Banshees of Inisherin or After Yang.
I agree,
and I don't mean to underplay Austin Butler, because I do think he's very good.
Butler.
No,
he's
it's not
electric
anti-Butler.
in Elvis.
What I'm saying, and if it sounds antagonistic, it's because I'm just that pro Colin Farrell.
Exactly,
that's
100%. That's what it is.
Yeah.
I feel like his performance in that film is on another level. And then we know that voters often vote this way, that they do consider the totality of an actor's year. And he had the best year any actor could have dreamed for. Like, it blows my mind that he wasn't in that conversation more. And especially if we want to talk about legacy and narrative, he's been around the block. He's been around for a long time as well. He's had his ups and downs. You know, the details of all of that are different than Fraser, but he's had his ups and downs as well. In fact, he was having a lot of struggles through the mid 2000s. It wasn't until In Bruges where things kind of started to take a different path for him.
I think it's where people notice, hey, this guy's actually a good actor. He's not just in phone booths and things like that.
He's not just Bullseye and Daredevil.
To be fair, he's probably the best thing in all those movies that came before it,
for
too.
sure. And I love
like
phone booths.
I think he's
great in that. Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
wholeheartedly. I agree. But people looked at him differently after In Bruges, and of course, he's done a lot of other great things since. Worked with some fantastic directors. And so, I mean, Colin Farrell has been around a long time. He also has the narrative, the legacy, if you will. So, like, why are we considering that less so to Fraser? Now, the story of Fraser is maybe like, it is so singular, so distinctive.
I mean, it could be its own movie. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised
really
if a documentary is made about it in a couple of years. But that's just how it is.
It is. And also, let's not forget, if we're talking legacy and narrative and someone who's been around a long time, Bill Nighy was never considered for this award, and this might have been his only opportunity.
Yeah. Well, maybe even Judd Hirsch as well.
I mean,
because Judd Hirsch has been nominated twice, including The Fabelmans. I think the first time was, what was that, for Running on Empty? I honestly don't remember, but I don't think he's won one yet. So he kind of fits the elderly narrative, if you want to call it that. It does get into this conversation we've had, not just offline, but I think on a few other episodes before, about the Oscars and the Academy and how rare it is that they tend to award more quiet, intimate, and internalized performances. You know, we talk about Casey Affleck as someone that did win and had a similar performance like that with Manchester by the Sea. But the 4 wins from last night, they're all great performances. I'm not trying to underplay them, but they do ask for some attention. You know, they do call attention to themselves. There is, you know, kind of a bigness to some of them, especially Jamie Lee Curtis. But Colin Farrell in The Banshees of Inisherin was a very quiet and internalized performance that was more built on facial expressions rather than what he said. And it's proof that it's a hard thing to do, like that, especially with regard to Black comedy. That's a hard thing to pull off. But I sometimes feel like we don't often see that kind of performance as widely recognized. And maybe it was just a little too dense for the Academy to pick up, given the narratives that were supporting these other people. I don't know. It could be the case.
నొకర మోగినట్టు సెవులు సిల్లు పడేలాగా కీసు బిడ్డ కూసినట్టు ఏలు సిటికెలేసేలా చెప్పాలం సాగినట్టు కాలు సింధు తొక్కేలా
The InSession Film Podcast is brought to you by our great friends over at First Time Watchers. Brendan, we are talking about the Oscars on this show.
We are.
And I got to say, the First Time Watchers podcast, it's an award-winning podcast. At least in my heart it is.
All three of them at the First Time Watchers podcast, all golden statues. That's
yes, exactly.
They're at least worth them, if I do say so myself. But they are a great supporter of our show. They've been a great supporter of our show since the inception of our show as well. So we've known them for probably 10 years. We can vouch for how great their podcast is. Those three golden statues, Tim, Walter, and Hermano, and they are literal Oscars because they know their movies.
They do know their movies. On their latest episode, they talked about the 1932 film Shanghai Express.
Going back.
Yeah, a film I haven't seen, but a fascinating conversation nonetheless that I definitely urge people to go and check out.
Such a unique thing for them because they'll pick out movies that they've never seen before, whether it's something old or new or on their list of shame or something weird and obscure. They're certainly no stranger to picking some weird 80s movie that no one would ever think to watch, which I love. I mean, it's not their full gimmick, but they do that quite often, and it makes for a very entertaining conversation, giving those respective reviews a very fresh and honest perspective. Also diving into some other movies that they've caught up with over the week, and maybe even some trailers that have come out that are worth noting too.
Yeah, they give out some recommendations at the end of their show that I would urge you to pay attention to as well. Overall, the show is very smart. It's tantalizing. It'll take you on an express to imaginary world, which is
it's also very golden. Very golden.
Very good, golden show. So with that said, Brendan, where can you find them on the internet?
You can check them out at firsttimewatchers.podbean.com. Once again, that's firsttimewatchers.podbean.com, spelled with the word first, not numerical first, FIRST, timewatchers.podbean.com. But you can also check them out on social media, either on Twitter at First Time Watchers or on Instagram at First Time Watchers, or simply searching for them on Facebook at First Time Watchers.
And go subscribe to them on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to leave them a review at the end of your review. We ask that you leave a lot of hashtags so they know we sent you to them. And this week, let's go with the hashtag
Golden Boys.
Golden Boys works. I was going to say hashtag we want Tim or we want more because Tim was very deliberate in noting that they only have 20 more episodes until they're done. And we need to cheer them on to do more. It's not going to happen, but the more we make it complicated for them, the more they'll consider it.
Let's start a golden petition for them.
There you go. Go check them out. We promise you'll love them. Again, that's First Time Watchers. Brendan, it is coffee time.
It's late at night. It's late at night as we're recording this. We shouldn't have coffee now, but I can't wait to have some. It could be decaf. I mean, I just love the taste. It certainly, hits me in that regard. But I'll tell you what, tomorrow morning I'll be itching for that cup of coffee.
Yeah, I mean, if you love a good cup of coffee, you have to consider Coffee Cot. They source only specialty grade coffee beans from over 50 countries around the world. They inspect each bean. They do not take defects in their coffee. What that means is that, they're not using low-grade coffee beans. These are specialty grade Arabica coffee beans. A lot of companies will use those, but they'll also take defects to cheapen the coffee, which will stack their profits. Coffee Call does not do that. They do not take defects. These coffee beans are of the highest quality possible. And also, they roast to order, which means that not only do they have the highest grade bean possible that they roast, but it's not just stashed somewhere in a warehouse. Like they wait for your order to come in. They roast
loaded
it,
with preservatives.
it.
It's made fresh, sent right to your door, as you're saying. So you are getting the freshest coffee that you can imagine.
Absolutely. One coffee I have to highlight here. Because
the flavor is better than I do.
I tried it over this last week. It is their Ethiopian Yirgacheffe coffee.
Oh, it sounds
My
so
God. So this I am not kidding when I say this is one of the best coffees I have ever had in my life. This coffee, it has cupping notes of like pineapple and strawberries. It's like a strawberry cheesecake in coffee form. Like that. I don't know how else to describe it other than that.
For those of us who love our coffee, it is kind of like a morning dessert for us in some ways. So what you're describing there is
it's so good.
There's a reason sometimes you offer coffee at the end of a meal because it's a perfect dessert like palate cleanser.
Yeah.
And I'm with you, man. That sounds delicious.
It is so delicious. Because I like to drink my coffee black. I don't put anything in it.
I mostly do as well.
And this is the kind of coffee where you really don't need anything. I am not kidding. When this is extracted right, it is one of the sweetest natural tastes that you will have when it comes to coffee. It really does have this strawberry kick to it that is unbelievable. It is one of the best coffees I've ever had. It's very good.
Yep.
So
and for those of you listening, if you're interested in trying Coffee Cult, but you're not sure about how these products are being sourced, if that's your concern, well, you'll be happy to hear that Coffee Cult only sources their coffees from farms that actually pay their workers, especially women, and it pays them equally and fairly. So if that's something you're also concerned about, then this should hopefully alleviate those concerns alongside presenting a very good product as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Ethically sourced, only the best coffee. And right now you can get it 15% off when you use our code ISF. That's 15% off coffeecult.com. 15% off. Use the code ISF. Are there any other categories you want to talk about? Like if we move away from the acting categories for a moment, is there something else that kind of stood out to you on the night?
I will say I wouldn't say I was surprised because I actually did predict this, but the middle of the night, I was about to change my tune, but Sarah Polley for Women Talking winning for adapted screenplay.
I loved that win.
Yeah,
that.
I did have that as my prediction.
Same.
But in the way that the night was going, I thought, maybe it'll actually go to All Quiet on the Western Front. And
started to doubt myself, yes.
The narrative of that being, a classic German novel and this being the first German film documentation of that novel, there is a narrative there. The theme of this whole episode is about narratives.
All about narrative. Yes.
But I started to think maybe that's going to win Best Adapted Screenplay. So I wouldn't say I was surprised, but it was nice to know that the Academy didn't forget about Women Talking. I'll simply say that. And I really like the movie. I think the screenplay is probably the strongest aspect of it. So I think that was a good win too. That was a nice little touch there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm wholeheartedly with you in the narrative being the theme of the night. Sarah Polley certainly fits into that in a big way as well. We mentioned this, I believe, when we reviewed Women Talking here on the show, that after Stories We Tell, which I will champion that documentary forever as being one of the best docs of the 2010s.
Sure.
But she has some struggles after the release of that film.
Yeah.
And then comes back all these years later with Women Talking. Like she has her own little story that wasn't circulating as much as the Brendan Fraser thing or Ke Huy Quan and some of these others.
It still has the same level of perseverance. Like I feel like that was the theme, like the meta theme behind everything there.
Absolutely. And of course, there's been some stats circulating that we've had a woman writer win the Oscar the last 3 years. So 3 years in a row we've had that, which is exciting. So I loved that Sarah Polley did walk away. I was really rooting for her. It was my prediction. It was the one that I also wanted to win as well.
Sure.
I do love Sarah Polley. Was happy to see that. As far as a few others that I personally just loved, and I'm sure everybody loved, at least this next one I'm going to bring up, Not To. Oh my God. What a highlight of the night. Not only winning, but that dance just blew everything away. So good.
I think we kind of knew that was happening. I mean, just listen to how the crowd responded when Not To was being introduced. I will say, I think we're veering a little bit off the awards themselves topic here, but I did want to mention the music performances from last night were really strong overall, even from songs that I didn't particularly care for or even really know about. I loved Rihanna's performance of Lift Me Up from Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. But the one, as much as I love Not To, the one that blew me away was Lady Gaga's performance of Hold My Hand, which like she removed her makeup. She kind of just stripped everything back. It reminded me
raw performance.
It reminded me of a band in their basement, just giving a passionate performance of one of their songs. It didn't even matter that her vocal performance wasn't perfect. Like there were some imperfections about it, but that's kind of what I loved about it. Like the imperfections of it. And like you said, the rawness was something I don't recall really seeing all that often when it comes to music performances at the Oscars. They're usually very extravagant, very big, very choreographed.
Yes.
This was not. And the performance made an effort to show everyone in that band playing their respective musical instruments. And as a bass player, seeing that bass player with an Aguilar cab and it's the type of gear I use, playing a Fender P bass as well. It's like, this is my kind of guy. I love this.
Yeah, that was a really great moment. And I mean, she started off by talking about how personal the song was for her. So for it to be this intimate thing, this intimate moment, certainly made sense. I thought it came off very well in the ceremony, like on camera. It was really great. I loved how stripped back it was, how raw it was. And then juxtaposed completely with Not To, which is loud and bombastic and choreographed and incredible.
Variety. I love it.
Yeah, that was really great. I mean, we all knew Not To was going to win, but still to see that, to hear his speech, he like half sings it, which was really fun as well. That was great. Another award that stuck out to me as well was Best Sound. Again, my background in sound engineering. I love this category. We knew that they needed to honor Top Gun Maverick in some way.
Of course.
It was a matter of which category are they going to award it. And I think this is a deserving one. I very much argued for All Quiet in this category as well when we did our prediction show. Right. But at the end of it, this one felt like the one it should go to, Top Gun Maverick. And I'm glad to see that it did win that category.
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about this when we reviewed it, that the sound was the visuals are great in that movie, but the sound is almost a character in some ways. I mean, like that's what adds to its level of literal height, like the height and the sonic nature of that movie is because of how it sounds. It just adds such a bigness to it. Like you feel like you're standing right next to that plane as it's taking off. It rumbles. It literally like has this rumbling effect, like it's distorting the bass of the actual microphone that's capturing it. So the fact that it sounds like it's about to blow the speakers out is kind of awesome. I love that.
I agree. Yeah, that was really fun to see. So Maverick wasn't there. Tom Cruise decided, screw this, I'm not going.
Yeah.
But at least they awarded that with something. And then the other one I want to mention here real quick, and we briefly mentioned it earlier, was Best Original Score. So I actually did throw this out on Twitter earlier, asking for any sort of listener feedback or questions. And we did get one from Erin Moriarty. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Erin.
Okay.
But she was asking, like, what are your feelings toward Babylon and it being snubbed? And she goes on to talk about how she feels Babylon should have won for best score, because it was the most memorable score of the year. And I don't disagree with that. When we did the InSession Film Awards, I did have Babylon winning for best score. So it is my personal favorite score of the year of this crop of nominees. That said, like, All Quiet on the Western Front is easily my second favorite of these. God bless John Williams, though. Do love him. But All Quiet on the Western Front, and you mentioned it earlier, like, it's not overly extravagant.
It's not.
It's like 3 different cues in this motif, and man, is it incredibly effective.
Well, and that's just the main theme. Like what I love about the score for this film is that if you remove that main theme and just listen to everything else that Volker Bertelmann, is that how you pronounce the composer's name?
Something like that.
If you listen to everything else that he's doing from a composition standpoint, there are some beautiful chord structures happening behind it.
Yeah, there's a lot that's
good
happening.
Piano motifs, some string motifs. It's not just that synth theme that creates this sense of danger as it's supposed to. This almost like industrial danger. Like it feels like it came out of a 90s industrial rock band from Germany.
Yeah, well, but you know what it reminded me of since the last time we talked about it, and I wish I would have had this thought when we did the InSession Film Awards, but it came to me sometime after. It reminded me a lot of Mad Max Fury Road in that regard.
I can see that,
There's like this incredible vibrancy and bombacity, intensity to that film, but layered in all of that are these really poignant and heartfelt cues that I think All Quiet also gets into. Now, in a very different way, obviously, but you have the tensity of that score and the vibrancy of it, which is really great. But yeah, I agree with you. There's these more subtle, these beautiful cues that are kind of thrown in there as well.
Right.
That kind of tap into the bleak and heartbreaking nature of what we're seeing visually.
Yeah.
And so,
And it's, I understand why the predictions, or at least most of the predictions, were favoring Justin Hurwitz for Babylon, because it is the most addictive score of the bunch.
Sure.
And
it's a lot of fun.
Let me just say this, because I feel like what I'm about to say might sound negative, and it's not meant to, because in my 5 nominees at the InSession Film Awards for Best Original Score, I also did have Justin Hurwitz for Babylon. He wasn't my winner. I actually gave it to All Quiet on the Western Front, but Justin Hurwitz was still nominated. It is the most memorable score of the bunch. It's not the most complex. Like from a chordal compositional standpoint, it's a pretty easy score. It's more like horn-led heavy metal, as I said. It sounds like a rock band could do it. You just replace the rock band with horns. But that's kind of what I love about it. I love the cacophonous nature of that, and it is very catchy. But I will say I'm glad that All Quiet took it, because I think there's a complexity there that Babylon doesn't quite have. And it's a more daring score too, if I do say so myself.
It is very daring. And I mean, maybe more than anything else though, I just love how complimentary it is to the film. I can't speak to it in the nerdy details that you can, but what I can speak to is how fitting I think it is. It certainly heightens the internal characterization that we see. Yeah. But just in terms of the arduous tension at the center of that film. Oh my God. Like, as soon as I watched it the first time, I couldn't even listen to the score on Spotify immediately because it made the hairs on my arms raise, because all I could think about was the harrowing nature of that film. Like, it took a few weeks for that to kind of dissipate so I could listen to it a little bit more.
I think I'm about to be run over by a tank every time I hear that. So I will. So, I mean, that theme should come with a warning: do not operate heavy machinery while listening to this piece, because you might think you're about to get run over by something.
And I think I tweeted it last night, or I certainly had this conversation with my friends. But like, as All Quiet is winning all these awards, and of course they play that score as they're walking up to the stage. And I got chills. I literally got chills listening to it again. I was like, oh my God.
It's like something's going to go wrong. Someone's gonna trip or something.
Absolutely. So like leading up to that category, I just got more and more excited. Even though I love Babylon, I love Justin Hurwitz. I will forever champion that score for sure. But I love this win. I honestly do love it. I'm not against it as well. Eventually, they do need to honor Justin Hurwitz, if not for Babylon, definitely for First Man. There was a makeup award for him coming down the road for them missing that one.
You know, if we keep talking about this idea that the Oscars will eventually start honoring movies that are 20 years old because they were maybe too ahead of the curve or something, maybe they can do that with every category and First Man can get its due for original score.
Yes, because we need that. Absolutely. I definitely want that for him. But, you know, that is to say, you know, because I know a lot of people love Babylon and love that score. And I am with you. Please do not take this as anti-Babylon sentiment. Yeah. I think that the score for All Quiet is just as good. It's complex as you're saying, Brendan, and it is so complimentary to that film. That to me isn't one of those pandering, let's just give All Quiet all of these tech, you know, categories. I don't think it's that at all. Similar to Top Gun earning for sound, I think the score here has earned it.
I agree.
Maybe that's a little hot takey. I don't know, but
I don't know.
I think it's deserved.
Great score. I think it's a great score. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you.
Yeah, I completely agree. Anything else come to mind? I think we've covered a lot of.
There are a couple things I want to bring up. Well, first off, let's just acknowledge this very quickly. Jenny the donkey.
Oh,
Jenny
yes.
the donkey.
What a fun surprise that was.
Colin Farrell looked so happy. The joy on his face when he saw Jenny.
Genuine. Yeah.
I thought, okay, so you've seen the Fred Rogers documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor, right? And remember it showed some archival footage of, oh man, what was his name? Jerry Erlinger, the one that was in the wheelchair that came out to present an award to him, and Fred Rogers just jumped right on stage to embrace him and hug him. I thought Colin Farrell was going to do the exact
like that.
same thing, in a Fred Rogers kind of way. It's like,
that would have been fun.
Yeah.
But after all the security measures, not sure that was going to be allowed.
You could tell
but...
he was inching, like, can I get on stage and say hi to Jenny? And it's like you could just kind of tell he was itching to make that literal leap. But yeah, I thought that was cute. But now to transition maybe to something a little bit more negative, and I feel like this happens every year. The in memoriam section. It always forgets some key people. Always some key people being missed. And
you know how they remedy that with a disingenuous QR code. Go see the rest of them here. No, I'm not putting my phone up to the TV for this.
Or a disingenuous joke from Jimmy Kimmel about Robert Blake trying to get added in late in the game, which I get that because, you know, he did pass away very recently. There was probably no way to actually honor Robert Blake in this short span of time in the literal slideshow, but it does sort of contradict itself when there are other people such as, I mean, like looking here, Paul Sorvino, what's her name from Triangle of Sadness, who died shortly before the release of the film.
The young actress.
Charlby Dean, I think her name is. Missing her, and the fact that the movie itself was nominated for a few awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. I mean, how do you forget her? Or Anne Heche. I don't remember seeing Anne Heche there too. So, it just becomes kind of a gross thing when you make a joke about it, when people are going to be forgotten anyway. It just kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, even though John Travolta's introduction of it was really heartfelt, and you could tell that there was genuine sadness there.
Well, I think that's what makes the frustration of it and those disingenuous qualities all the more frustrating, I guess, because his lead into that was so heartfelt, absolutely heartbreaking. And then for you to follow it up like that. and look, the sound, like the song, I thought was very good.
Yeah.
Like I thought
I like Lenny Kravitz.
Yeah. Exactly. Like I didn't have any issue with the presentation.
Yep. I'm with you.
All of that was fine. But yeah, like leaving out key pieces and then just like, if you want to see more of who had died, click on this link. And it's like, no, that's not how this works.
That just makes it seem like they're less important somehow. And I don't like that. I don't like that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, understandably, you can't necessarily fit in like 132 people on a slideshow for the in memoriam.
Right.
But I don't think the answer is to see everybody else use this QR code. Like that's not just no. After the last person is done, after the song is done, you just kind of leave it at that.
I think the answer really is add length to the song and the performance in the slideshow and take out the Disney crap with the Little Mermaid and the whole Warner Brothers.
Yeah, because what is that? That's 2 minutes of that trailer. Take that out, add another 2 minutes to the song.
And apparently they didn't even see the trailer at the actual ceremony if you were there live for it. Like we saw it at home, but I don't think anyone saw it there, which just makes it so ironic and hilarious.
Absurd. So absurd. But to your point though, the John Travolta lead in was great. And it was interesting because now I feel terrible about this, but I was joking with my friends and everybody over at the party last night because I didn't know, maybe they had announced this. If they did, I had completely missed it. I did not know what he was presenting for or what he was going to be doing on stage. Mm-hmm. So before the Oscars started, and I'm already 2 or 3 drinks in at this point, for whatever
Your
that's
gin and
worth.
tonics are doing work, man.
Yeah. But before the ceremony even began, I was like, "Oh boy, what's he going on stage? Is he going to mess up somebody's name again?
Is he promoting The Fanatic? That movie, The Fanatic.
Like, what kind of antics are we getting in with John Travolta, tonight?" And then dumb JD. It was anything but that. It was so poignant and sincere and genuine.
Yeah.
And then, and he kept it together for the most part right up until the end.
Yeah.
And then of course he gets that line and he couldn't get through it. I loved it.
Yeah.
One of the
especially
best
knowing that one of
the
the first names in that slideshow was Olivia Newton-John.
Of course.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing that's worth noting, changing gears a little bit, and this was maybe a little bit of a surprise because the film itself wasn't as revered as the first one, and we weren't sure if she was going to win, but Ruth Carter winning again, and she becomes the first African-American woman to win 2 Oscars, to have multiple Oscars.
Right.
So that was exciting. I don't know if I anticipated that as much. It wasn't on my prediction to win. Did you have that or not?
I didn't get that far with it. But looking at the nominees now for Best Costume Design, I mean, I feel like it could have gone to any one of these 5. So I'm not too surprised to see it go to Ruth Carter. Again, maybe it's the narrative supporting that again. Like the fact that any 5 of these are really elaborately dressed movies, I'll simply say. Very artistically dressed. The work is on the screen. I mean, we talked about with a movie like Black Panther Wakanda Forever, it's maybe not the best looking movie, but it works from a costume and wardrobe standpoint. A lot, if there's any money that went anywhere, it's mostly in that regard as far as how the film looks. So I guess that justifies her win. I'm not unhappy with her winning, but I guess I'm not too surprised given the narrative there that she also won for the first Black Panther as well, if I'm not mistaken. So,
and that's why I was curious. I always felt like she had a chance because of her win, but I also thought, well, she's already won for Black Panther, a previous Black Panther movie, that maybe this is where they'll award Elvis, because I went into this thinking that Elvis is getting something. And if it's not going to win for makeup and it's not winning for production design and whatever else it was nominated for, maybe it gets in for costume. Right. Okay, well, if it's not Elvis, maybe it's Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that film is sweeping everything tonight.
Yeah.
And then, so when she won, it was a little bit of a surprise, but that's not to say it's not earned or that it's not worthy. I mean, I'm with you. Like what she does for that film in terms of costumes is one of the best things about Black Panther.
Yeah, and I could see why it would go to a film like Black Panther Wakanda Forever or even Everything Everywhere All at Once. When I saw the clips for it as we were watching it, my first thought was it's probably going to go to Everything Everywhere because it's the most elaborate and strange and creative of the bunch. But I guess that just proves that, movies like Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris and Elvis and Babylon, they're more steeped in recreating history. So there's literal research you can do there, which doesn't necessarily mean they're they're not as well costumed, if that makes sense. But
Sure. Yeah.
it felt like the trajectory was going in a more creative and obscure direction when it comes to a lot of movies this year. Like, this was really a year of not just honoring perseverance, but also obscurity. And that was very much on display with a lot of wins last night.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And that was certainly one of the more fun aspects to the Oscars this year. That is for sure. One other thing though that I did want to bring up here, and I am not really qualified to speak on this. I do want to mention it because it's a talking point out there. There's been some great writing on it this morning. Angela Bassett was very visually disappointed and upset that she lost to Jamie Lee Curtis. And for a lot of the reasons we talked about earlier, I just don't think that when, like, the legacy of it, I don't think will be great. But I do understand, again, she's been around forever. She campaigned her butt off. But Angela Bassett similarly has been around for a long time, has paid her dues, and also campaigned her butt off. And she had won major precursors prior to this where Jamie Lee Curtis did not.
Yeah.
So from a competition perspective, I understand why she is upset. From an Oscars historical diversity perspective, although the night on the whole was pretty good in that regard.
Yeah.
At least in terms of Oscars history and Asian actors and representation.
Yeah.
But in terms of Black representation, it was great to see Ruth Carter win, as we talked about before. But I mean, there's not really a ton of Black nominees here to begin with. Although Brian Tyree Henry being nominated for Causeway was awesome. I loved that as well.
That was a good one.
It was a good one. Angela Bassett, you could see it in her frustration. When they announced Jamie Lee Curtis, she did not bat an eye on it. She did not smile. She was clearly disturbed and not happy about it. And I at least wanted to bring it up because I do empathize. I certainly understand the frustration that many are feeling in that regard. I can't really speak to it much beyond that for obvious reasons, but there's been some great writing out there from writers of color that I definitely urge people to go and check out because it's been some really great stuff.
Yeah.
Right now,
I'll just say that regardless of it's Angela Bassett or not, any actor has the right to be disappointed if they don't win something that they're proud of. I'll simply say that. And I don't know the extent of her disappointment. I mean, unless she comes out and says what it was, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we don't know if it's because she's disappointed that Jamie Lee Curtis won specifically, or if it was just the fact that she was upset that it didn't go to her and how she worked her butt off for it, as you say. I don't know what that is, but any performer has the right to be upset if it doesn't go their way. It's just how it is. Yeah,
for sure. And I guess I bring it up because there's already a larger talking point regarding Black representation at the Oscars. Still, even now, after all these years of trying to align the Academy in a more diverse way, there's some frustrated feelings out there, and there's been some great critics of color that wrote some phenomenal pieces this morning.
Yeah.
That again, I urge you to go and seek out.
I agree,
because it's been some great stuff. So I at least wanted to, bring that or give that a little bit of attention. We didn't really talk about it too much. I guess the last thing I'll say here, I always love it when Guillermo del Toro wins awards. And he was the first one of the night, breaking people's hearts early on with that speech. Oh my God. So good.
Guillermo del Toro. I love him.
We knew that was going to win. And, so that wasn't a surprise, but I always love him winning awards, and his speech was great once again. So
absolutely.
That was definitely a highlight for me as well. Before we get to the poll, I mentioned earlier that I did throw out the question on social media as far as, any questions or feedback that people had from the Oscars. I already brought up one of them earlier, but I also want to bring up a tweet here from Ian who says, would you say relying on BAFTA was a mistake in determining some of your predictions in the main categories? I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
I didn't really base it off of that. When I tried to do my predictions, I was basing it more on a broader stroke rather than just like one specific awards outlet. I feel like doing that, regardless if it's BAFTA or any awards outlet leading up to the Oscars, I feel like that's always a potential room for disappointment, because there's I mean, a lot of times there's more, like statistically there's maybe more of a 1-to-1 ratio between how the BAFTAs shape up and maybe how the Oscars shape up. I get that, but I never really go by those statistics. It's always based on a hunch, if I'm being honest, and just how the night and the narrative supporting those people kind of feels. So yeah, I didn't base it off that, but I don't know if I'd say it's a mistake, because a lot of these people out there who work for certain publications that are built around Oscar predictions specifically, a lot of them are very good at mathematical statistics, and that's a very fair way of going about it. So I don't think it's ever a mistake. I think just this year may have been a bit of an anomaly, if that makes sense.
I think that is the case as well, based off of this one stat. Now, I'm certainly far from a Matt Neglia and a Ryan McQuaid. If Ryan were here, he certainly could speak to this in more detail.
Absolutely.
I will say this, though. I did read a stat that this was the first time since 1997 that none of the BAFTA winners repeated at the Oscars.
Interesting.
So that is to say, I think that kind of helps complement what you're saying there, Brennan, in the sense that this might just be a one-off. If this was the first time in, 20 years, over 20, 25 years?
25 years, yeah. 26, I guess, actually.
I mean, that to me suggests that there is always going to be, or most of the time, there will be crossover between BAFTAs and the Oscars.
Yeah.
So
there are other factors to consider too that, I mean, maybe we are talking about, I'm just not sure of it, but like sometimes the voting body changes over the years. We get new members into the Academy that might have a different mindset, a different love and appreciation for film. There's an evolution there, and not just with the Oscars, but like the BAFTAs. There are ins and outs between who's actually voting for these films at every award ceremony, governed by any body there. So the question also becomes, what is that mindset? Like what kind of people are being polled, because that can always skew a certain subset of results then. And we don't know what those are. I mean, unless we survey them. Yeah.
Each year will be distinctive in that regard. And it really just comes down to, again, who's nominated, what narratives are out there, and maybe, as we talked about earlier, the voting body of the Academy has been shifting and evolving since 2016.
Yeah.
Maybe as a result, the voting trends will shift away from the BAFTAs.
Maybe.
Who knows? We'll see. Time will tell.
Time will tell. Maybe this is a first step in something new.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about this week's poll.
It's real bad, okay? I don't like those numbers at all.
Just one poll? Those things aren't scientific.
Yes, they are. All this is science. This is math.
So for this week's poll, given the fact that we're talking about the Oscars right now, we asked all of you the most Oscar-related question we can think of. What is your favorite Scream sequel?
Yes.
JD, this probably would have been more appropriate to lump on our review of Scream 6, which you and I did with our good friend Jay Ledbetter.
It's out now. Go check it out.
Now, go check it out. It was a great conversation. A movie I'm liking more as time has gone on. Even in the short amount of time that we talked about it, I'm liking it more. I think this could be the biggest grower of the franchise, but it's between this and Scream 3 that have weird, interesting nuances to them that I'm really curious to see if it holds up on a repeat watch. But we're not talking about Scream 6 now. Go and check out that review to hear all the reasons why we mostly enjoyed that film. We asked all of you, what is your favorite Scream sequel, which includes Scream 2, 3, 4, and I wrote in parentheses 5, because who knows what that movie is really called. I still call it 5 Cream. I know I should stop doing that, but
yeah, you should.
And this was a two-person race, or a two-horse race, most specifically. We got almost 200 votes on Twitter, which was really exciting. But I'm sure you can guess, JD, it was basically between Scream 2 and Scream 4. And the winner was, by a slight margin, Scream 4. Actually wins here at 41%. 36% then goes to Scream 2. Now, just to get into the rest of the results here, in third place was actually Scream 5 at 15%, and then Scream 3 at 8%. Poor Scream 3. I guess that movie's just too biting and too mean for people to really get a hold of.
Yeah, clearly.
I like Scream 3. I think it's certainly better than Scream 5. I mean, I think it's a lot better.
I agree.
I think we talked about this during our review of Scream 6, JD, but I feel like you, me, and even Jay, we would agree that Screams 2 and 4 are the best of the two sequels. Maybe we might differ on which one we prefer of the two, but I feel like our top three would be the first one, the second one, and the fourth one. And are you in the same boat as that?
Yeah, my favorite of them is Scream 2. I think that's a really good sequel.
Yeah.
Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting because I do think that Scream 4 is a better movie overall and a more seamless movie. Maybe I need to see it again to give it perhaps to see if it would bump up even further because it's a movie I did really like. I think there's some redundancies to it that keep me from fully embracing it. Scream 3 is a messier film. There's no way around that. But it's so fascinatingly messy.
It's a bold film. It is a bold and
it
is certainly the most daring of the entire franchise. It's the most biting and the meanest of them all. But yeah, I see where the love of Scream 4 is coming from. It is my favorite of the sequels, and honestly, I like it even more after seeing Scream 5 last year and seeing how much of a regurgitation Scream 5 was of Scream 4 specifically. It's so ahead of the curve as far as what it's saying about Lego sequels that I have to honor that film for that reason.
And that's very fair. And that's where I'm a little bit torn because in terms of its meta qualities and what you're talking about there, yeah, that makes Scream 4 one of the best films in the franchise. Admittedly, though, some of its tropiness does bog it down for me. It's redundant. The motives of Ghostface are the exact same as Scream 3, almost.
It kind
verbatim.
of is. I love the killer reveal of that movie. I think maybe I won't spoil it, but insert actor's name here who plays the killer in Scream 4 really goes for it, and I just cannot help but get on its level. If there's one thing about Scream 4 I don't love, it's the overall look of the film. It has this like murky color palette that I don't particularly love when compared to the rest, which had this very clean, almost 90s sheen to it. But maybe that's the point. That's the this arrives right back to the whole thesis of the Scream franchise. That's the point.
Go listen to our Scream review. That phrase will make a lot more sense, and you'll know why we laughed when you listen to that conversation.
If you're a fan of the podcast and you're also a new fan of the video format we're doing, and you're looking for a new drinking game, every time we say that's the point during our review of Scream 6, there is your drinking game.
And you'll get pretty buzzed real fast.
Yeah.
That was a fun conversation. Yeah, but yeah, that'll add some context to what Brendan was just saying there. And yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot to love about Scream 4. And that's why maybe I like to rewatch it a little bit more, because maybe if I can look past some of those redundancies and, you know, the repeat factor of motive and all that stuff, maybe I'll like it as much as Scream 2. But that is to say, like, I have it ranked just behind Scream 2, but maybe not, like the disparity between 3 and 4 aren't, as of right now anyway, aren't crazy different.
Yeah, 3 is a good movie. 3 is a good movie.
Yeah.
Really, the only Scream film I don't like, and we talked about this during our review, it's Scream 5. That's the only one I don't care for.
Yeah. And as far as Scream 6 goes, like, I'm inching closer to it being number 3 for me.
Wow.
Like,
I have it at number 4
like
right now. I have it at number 4 right now, but that's the one I could see rising the ranks as opposed to falling the ranks.
I agree. I mean, right, like, if it's not behind Scream 2, like, if I don't have it at 3, I also have it at 4 with you. I'm very much in that realm.
I think if I'm ranking them as purely just slasher entertainment and not as Scream films, just as a vacuum, Scream 2 is not Scream 2. Scream 6 is probably my number 2. Just in that regard,
That's
and
fair.
how effective it is as a thriller. But as a Scream film, I think some of these others have more of an edge as far as their meta qualities are concerned.
That's fair.
Scream 4 has the best quote of the entire franchise. How meta can you get? How whata can you get?
That's good. And then the phrase right behind that for me is the one we talked about in our Scream 6 review.
Yep.
As it relates to franchises, and maybe it can go, do one of those.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a particular finger that it might earn.
Like, just so good. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Good franchise.
I think I do like it on the whole. I think right now I'm 1, 2, maybe 6, then 4, then 3 and 5.
We're not too far off. Too far off.
But right now 4 and 6 are kind of interchangeable. I can go back and forth on them. So
yeah, we're not too far off. Yeah, good franchise. I like this franchise. I can't wait for Scream 7 now. I can't believe I'm saying that.
I know. Who would have thought? I don't know if I would have said that a week ago. But here we are. At any rate, I guess that'll do it for this week's show. What are we talking about next week? I won't be here next week.
You will not be here next week.
I will not be here next week. I can't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I certainly meant to, and then we got talking about parties and drinking and Oscars, and it totally lost my train of thought. I will be gone for a while. So my wife is very pregnant right now. And we're like high alert on baby watch. It's any time now. So this will be my last episode. Ryan and Brendan will take over the host chair. And of course, Jay will be here moving forward as well. So it'll be those three holding down the fort for a few months while I'm away with.
We'll miss you, man, and best of luck to you, and especially Brandy in this endeavor. I cannot wait to see the happiness that ensues when Andrew comes into the world.
Yep, thank you. I really do appreciate that. We're very, very excited for baby Andrew to get here. So this will be my last show for a while. I'll come back sometime during the summer, perhaps. Maybe I'll make a cameo here and there, depending on the week and what's going on. So.
Hey, you've got less editing to do given this new format, so the time is of the essence, man.
That is true.
Yeah.
So as far as next week, Shazam related?
That's what I'm thinking. It's still to be determined as far as what the actual topic will be on the main show, but I think it will be something related to at least DC, maybe something in that regard. There will, of course, be a review of Shazam: Fury of the Gods.
The state of the DC Union.
Oh, man.
You guys should do that.
We kind of already did talk about the DCEU, or at least the new DCU, as far as what's shaping up. I think we talked about that in the first ever episode in this new format, because we had some Q&A from some of our listeners.
We did. Yeah.
So some of that's already been discussed. We might try and do something a little bit different. Maybe a little bit more creative. Maybe we'll see some news that pops up this year that'll spark some type of conversation that'll be more warranted and more interesting. But yeah, at the very least, look out for some reviews coming your way. One of them being Shazam: Fury of the Gods, and of course, Ryan and Jay still in the middle of their Wong Kar-wai movie series. Just released their review of Days of Being Wild. Chungking Express is next.
I'm so excited for that one.
Maybe we'll try to jump on that one. I want to try and jump on a few with those guys, because I'm a big fan of Wong Kar-wai, at least based on the films that I've seen, which isn't as many as I would like to admit. But I can't wait to close the loop on all of these films.
Yeah, I did see As Tears Go By. I really liked it. It's a lot of the criticisms that Ryan and Jay offered, I do agree with. I don't know if I wholly agree with them about the ending of the film. There's a lot that plays out there that I think the film is pretty, like vividly building to throughout that film. But in terms of like planting the seeds as far as who Wong Kar-wai would become in terms of cinematography, lighting, composition, and also taboo relationships, or at least complicated relationships. That's very much at the core of As Tears Go By as well. So it's a film I really did like. I haven't seen Days of Being Wild yet. I hope to catch up with that.
I was going to ask if you've seen that one yet. And I'll say this. Days of Being Wild is a film that I think works so much more knowing that it's kind of in this unofficial trilogy of sorts, because Maggie Cheung's in it and plays the same character that she does in The Mood for Love. So there are direct ties there with, you don't need to see one film to lead into the other. The narratives are their own things, and the characters are on their own respective journeys that don't necessarily tie into each other, but thematically, knowing the sense of loneliness and betrayal that you feel in The Mood for Love, that helps amplify what makes Days of Being Wild so interesting.
Fascinating. Yeah, I'm going to try to catch up with that this week, as well as Chungking Express. I was hoping to be on one of those reviews, but things got delayed, and now
you're
I'm
a dad, man.
I'm on Baby Watch
You're
now.
a dad times 2 now, so I think that's pretty important.
Exactly. Yeah, so I unfortunately won't be there, but to what Brendan was saying, I'm very excited for that movie series and to see how the rest of that goes. But yeah, definitely go and check out Days of Being Wild. That is up. Our review for Scream 6 is up, as we noted as well. And we'll have a review for Shazam coming out very soon as well. And then also Women in Session. Don't want to leave them out. Be sure to go and check out the latest Women in Session. I think on this week's show, if I'm not mistaken, because I know they recorded one over the weekend. You know what? I should just look it up here real fast because I have it right here. I'm pretty sure. So
was it the one on William Holden? Was their most recent episode that's published?
Yeah, William Holden. Yep, that one was just dropped. So definitely go and check that out. And then on this week's Women in Session, we're doing Sydney Pollack films. So be on the lookout for that.
All right. Okay.
And then they just recorded. So in a few weeks, they're doing blind spots, some major blind spots that they have.
You know what?
So
I respect that. I think a great critic is knowledgeable and smart enough to admit that they haven't seen everything. It's
exactly. There's no way you've seen everything.
I appreciate critics who own up to that.
Yeah, we haven't seen everything all at once.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Wait, that little movie that won Best Picture? Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, never heard of it. At any rate, that'll do it. I think that'll do it. Unless you have any...
I think that's a good way to close this session out, JD.
All right. Well, with that, be sure to hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Of course, on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube as well. If you want to email us, InSessionFilm@gmail.com is a great way to get a hold of us. Be sure to leave us any reviews you have. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We will love your reviews there. If you want to help out the show, head on over to the site at InSessionFilm.com/donate. You'll see a bunch of ways that you can help us there, including Patreon. Patreon is a great way to help us out. Patreon.com/InSessionFilm. And with that, I bid you all a farewell for
a few months.
I don't know how long. Yes. It'll be at least a few months. I'll hope to be back sometime, midsummer maybe, end of the summer. We'll see how it goes.
Depends on when Brandy says so.
Exactly. Yeah. Andrew will dictate a lot of this. So we'll see. At any rate, everyone enjoy. Be nice to the fellas. Be nice to Ryan and Brendan and Jay. And we will see you all next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Kihi Kwan, what a win. Oh,
Tearjerker, man.
Yeah, so good.
Lowe's knows top outdoor power equipment, and now's the time to get your yard ready for spring with Ego Outdoor Power Equipment starting at $219. Experience the latest innovations in outdoor battery power from Ego, like Speed IQ technology that adapts mower speed to your stride. Get continuous non-stop trimming with the Line IQ string trimmer, and get added steering wheel precision with the E-Steer zero-turn mower. Shop Ego, the #1 rated brand in cordless outdoor power, only at Lowe's today.